Today I'm going to talk to you about the creative process that I use in getting one of the musical instruments that I make from concept to market. But first I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. I build unique handheld electronic musical instruments that I sell on Etsy. And the instruments that I build are mainly used by musicians making experimental and digital music, but occasionally I get a mainstream artist wanting one of my items. That's my Etsy site, and basically I upload the photos and the descriptions of my items, and they come up on the site for sale, and everything else is handled by Etsy. So the start of the design process, the designs and ideas come pretty easy. I've got probably way too many than I can deal with. It could be that I'm looking for a certain sound, or it could be that I'm looking for an interesting interface that will allow me to play an instrument in a different way. For instance, putting light sensors on an instrument instead of sliders or other controls. So I start with a physical picture of what I want it to look like, then perhaps block diagrams or circuit diagrams, and even output waveform diagrams that I want it to actually sound like in the end. At this point I have to say to myself, is this something that I can actually take and make a product out of, or is it one of Brian's dream instruments that are just going to never be built? Now comes the prototyping stage. So what I do is I get components together, and I get the microcontroller that I'm going to use together, and I put them on something called a breadboard, and that's the white device in the middle at the bottom there, and it has electrical connections on the bottom of it that allow me to take components and just slot them into it and pull them out very quickly. So it allows me to do rapid prototyping and not having to solder a component in and out and in and out every time I want to change it. It's a really good way of getting some hardware made very quickly. Next, I start writing a computer program. All of my devices use a microcontroller, which is a small chip that allows me to write a computer program and upload it to the chip, and then that chip then knows the program, holds it in memory, it takes the inputs, it shapes the waveform the way I programmed it to do it. It's a really fun part of the process because the possibilities and the programs that I can make are almost endless, and the way I can shape the sounds is something very unique that I can do. Next, I think about what my devices are going to look like. Sometimes I'll put them in a plastic case with a metallic front panel. This one's called the Master Looper. It's a very simple looper. It has 3 controls, a frequency control, a tempo control, and a write control. Basically, you enter the loop by pressing the write control. It remembers where the frequency knob was at the time. Each time the loop comes around, like a tape that's on a reel that's endless, it plays that same thing. So you can build up a layer at a time. You can also play with the tempo control. You can turn it down very slow, make quite a complicated loop, then you can speed it up to create a loop that you actually couldn't physically play live. I also like working with wood, and this is something called the EM-tronic. Again, it's a very basic device. It has 2 controls, frequency and modulation. I've put a few secret modes in there that make extra sounds, but essentially you could just pick that up and play with the controls and make some digital music. This is a device called the Lunar Cube. Very original kind of name. And it's an example of one of my devices that uses a different kind of interface. It uses light sensors, which are the two black things that you can see on the top. And what you do is you create the different sounds by letting different levels of light come into them. You can also use things like LED key rings. They actually flood the light sensors instantly, and you can turn them on and off and on and off and get a really glitchy sound with them, which is really quite fun to play. The next step in the process is probably my favourite, and it's where I get to take the final instrument and learn how to play it, because I've never played it before, and I often get quite surprised at what sounds it will make. Even though I wrote the program and the hardware, actually physically playing it creates quite some interesting sounds. I also think at this point, because I'm learning how to play the instrument, what are people going to want to know about it, and what a user manual may contain, because I'm learning and the person who buys it will be learning also. At this point I'll do a production run of 2 or 3 units, and this just gives me an idea of how long it will take to build the item, and that gives me an idea of the final cost. The final step in the process is listing the instrument on Etsy. This is where I upload the 5 best photos that I've taken of it. That's an example of one of them. I write a detailed description, letting people know exactly what it will do. But the most important thing I do is I take a video of the item and me playing it. This is so important because it's the only way I can show people what the item looks like, what it plays like and sounds like at the same time, because I'm expecting them to buy it without even seeing the item. I've actually got one of these devices called the R-Drone station here today, and what I'm going to do is just play a little bit so that you can hear what they sound like. That's it. Thanks very much. My website is rarebeast.com, and there are lots of different instruments you can find there if you want to have a look at them. There's also my contact details and things up there if you'd like. Thank you very much.